And we're live. I think we're live. Hello. Welcome back to Please Don't Livestream. And to this episode 20. Technically, it's episode 30, but we renamed it so. But today we are talking about Planet of the Apes, the entire franchise, because just the other day, actually, 5 days ago, 5 days ago, and 5 days and 50 years ago, I should say, Planet of the Apes premiered in America, at least. It's still a month away in Europe, but I figured we could celebrate it right now. And with me, I have Ren from All Walks of Film.
Hey.
Hey. Yeah, he's been here before. He was in the Oscar talks right after the Oscars. And we, I think like a few weeks ago, or like now it's like a couple months ago, we realized that we both have Planet of the Apes as our favorite sci-fi franchise. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it has a lot of heart, something that a lot of sci-fi films lack. And I think it is the most socially relevant sci-fi franchise to date.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say there's probably some sci-fi movies that are more socially relevant, but as a franchise, as a series of movies, it is consistently very poignant and on point when it comes to social commentary. And I think that's what got me hooked. Not in the beginning, but at least now when I'm a little bit older. Because I think I was like 8 or 9 when I saw the first movie. I saw it on TV. So that would be, about 20 years ago now, which I was thinking about that before, just tangent. 20 years ago, this franchise was only 30 years old. So it just got me thinking about how old I am getting. But yeah, I didn't see the rest of the franchise though until when the new one came out, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Because that I knew about the other ones, but I hadn't really cared about them. But it was with that one I thought, oh, so maybe the rest of the franchise is also good as well. And that's when I started exploring it for real. But the first one I saw, about 20 years ago. How about you?
All right, so I have a confession to make. So the first Planet of the Apes movie I saw was I think it was 1999. I can't remember.
It's somewhere there. That or 2001. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the Tim Burton one.
Oh yeah.
And that was back when I liked everything.
Okay.
My taste but I was sort of captivated by the concept of it. And then I was kind of excited about it. And then my mom was like, you need to watch the original.
Oh, okay.
And and she did that to me, and I owe a lot of my film love to my mom.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, sure.
But that being said, I then saw the original Planet of the Apes, and I didn't go further because I was advised that it wasn't good after that. But then I saw the trailer for Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Wasn't buying it, actually. It didn't impress me when I first saw that first trailer, and it wasn't until I heard other people say how good it was that I just blind bought it on Blu-ray and then was hooked into the entire franchise, bought a box set of the original on Blu-ray, and really dove in. And now I've gotten to the point now where I get the pop vinyls, I collect the comic books. I'm a huge fan now.
Okay. I was just gonna say about the Tim Burton one. Although it's probably the worst if you want to count it as part of the franchise, I would say though that even like now, I think the ape costumes are pretty good in that movie. That's at least
they're very
something
good.
Positive about it.
And the makeup is spectacular.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really weird that they tried to remake such a pivotal movie, and try and change it as much as they did, and like focus on the more like adventure aspect of it. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird, and it didn't really pan out as we know now. But yeah, great effects. But speaking more about like the rest of the genre or the franchise, or in general, just which one is your favorite? If we're counting, I'm assuming we're counting the new ones as well as part of the franchise, or as part of the timeline.
So, being somebody who loves the franchise in all, I really have to say that this is not recency effect that's guiding this opinion, but I personally think that War for the Planet of the Apes is my favorite in the entire franchise, and that's because it has so much heart. It's so grounded in its story, and it manages to subvert some of the expectations audiences had going in. It challenged what a summer blockbuster could be today. It felt more like an auteur piece of like the 70s than something that you normally see where you know everything's going to work out. You know that things are going to be all right. And that's not the Planet of the Apes franchise.
No.
Especially if you go back to the older ones, they get bleak, especially at their endings. It's like each one is trying to top the other one on how bleak the ending can be.
Yeah, that is something I really enjoy about the movies, even with the new ones, even though they're a little more hopeful sometimes, at least. Yeah, that they are very bleak. I mean, quick thing here, just spoilers. If anyone watching this now or in the future, we are going to spoil some of the movies, I suppose, because we got.
I think we're going to spoil all of them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, there aren't. I mean, some. I guess you could like now could maybe call it a little bit edgy, but I mean, no movies nowadays would end their movie with blowing up the planet. That is just, I mean, unheard of. I guess back then as well. In the Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Lars von Trier is raising his hand right now.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. But I mean, just how they just end that, like, fuck it, let's just push the button, blow up the world. That is very hard. And then to make a sequel to that, that's ballsy. And speaking of favorite movies, I'm kind of jumping back and forth. I mean, the original is always the original, but I think I'm leaning more towards, either War for the Planet of the Apes or Escape from the Planet of the Apes. Escape being the third one. And why that is so interesting is how they changed it up, but still kept the same themes and tone going. You know, they travel back in time, and they really hammer home the themes of racism and xenophobia, but in a contemporary setting, which I don't know, maybe that's like easier to follow, and that's why I kind of lean more towards that one. But I really like the juxtaposition of apes in a human world more than humans in an ape world. It's interesting.
Yeah, speaking of that, I'm a little bit more drawn to conquest in those terms.
Yeah.
But I do like what you're saying about Escape. Now, Casey, my co-host, and I argue because she thinks that is the worst in the entire franchise.
What? Okay.
Yeah. I think she gets wrapped up with the whole grape juice plus thing, which I actually really like.
Yeah, I like that. It's a little silly, but I mean, it works.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of it has to do with its cultural relevance to the time. Now, Escape is interesting because you throw in a little bit of women's lib into that as well with Zira's character, and you know, the whole fish out of water and the whole pro-choice, pro-abortion argument that is brought up into the film.
Yeah.
Which is challenging. And I do appreciate when films manage to challenge you in those sorts of ways whether or not you're on one side of the political fence or another. I like that films bring things up to the discuss, and each of the films, even when their production budget's lower, they're always tackling something topical.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what's appealing to me as well about the entire franchise, or especially the older ones, is that they were always working on like lower and lower budgets, but still, because of that, they have to get creative with their story and their character and all that, and try to make it interesting without it being a spectacle. Because even though you can't really say that today, but these were blockbusters, but they were like these super small movies. I mean, even for their time. The first one, they got their budget cut in half from $10 to $5 million, and they still managed to like make it a blockbuster. And the same thing with the other ones. I think they range between like $3 and $2 million per movie.
And that was
even counting for inflation. That is still like a super low budget by today's standards.
Yeah, and that's back when sequels weren't considered viable.
Yeah. Oh, what a time to be
nowadays
alive. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, right. I mean, you had your like Universal monster movies and stuff, but and James Bond sort of, but like you didn't have like big franchises in the United States like we do now. But that being said, yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic franchise, and I'm really glad that it isn't just a remnant of history.
Yeah, exactly. It stayed relevant, and then we could sort of segue into the newer movies, because I was after having watched the old one and having read up on it a little bit before the Rise came out. I was a little worried that it would just be like they would take the spectacle of apes riding horses and apes fighting and talking and making that into a movie. But then they actually made something clever with the new ones as well, and continued that theme of making, I guess, smart blockbusters, just as the old ones. Because like I know I mentioned that in my review of War, that I mean these three movies, whether it's Rise, Dawn, and War. They took like 6 years to make those three movies, and in the same time span you would have like 5 or 6 Marvel movies, just as an example. So it really shows that still to this day they take their time with writing and making these movies, and it really shows. Like I said, War for the Planet of the Apes was one of the best movies of last year, like in general.
Yeah, and I really think that Rupert Wyatt offered something really fresh with that first film. And then Matt Reeves took over and turned it into something amazing. But I think the real reason why it succeeded was because he's a fan of the franchise, but not just a fanboy. Like he really understands the franchise and what makes it important, which elevates each of the movies that he's directed. And he's also a writer, which I always say that director writers, can either make or break a film or a series. I mean, look at Star Wars. But that being said, I think that he has really transformed the franchise, and while I'm okay with it stopping at War, I would like to see it continue.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting, because I feel like War for the Planet of the Apes is sort of like a logical conclusion. With a few, I mean, it doesn't like line up completely, but technically what we have now is more or less a complete circle of the story. If you look at you have Planet of the Apes, and you have Beneath, and then Escape. And in Escape, they tell you how the Planet of the Apes came to be. It was the whole revolution with the apes, taking over after being enslaved by humans, and then that actually coming true in Conquest, and then they kind of change history, if you will, in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, where apes and humans eventually live in harmony. But then they kind of rewind time again with Rise, and you get to actually see how we get to the first movie, Planet of the Apes, and I feel like where War for the Planet of the Apes ends, the first Planet of the Apes kind of starts, sort of. Well, there's a time jump, of course, but so for me, not being a fan of sequels, really, even though I like these movies, I've heard that they're going to make another one, but I really hope they don't, because it feels just complete as it is now.
Well, I think the real thing that I've kind of challenged all the films on is the fact that it never felt like Planet of the Apes. It always felt like, you know, Country of the Apes or Land of the Apes or something like that. And I think what you could do is, instead of just being fixed in one location, you could actually move to another side of the world and sort of, you know, branch the franchise into something that's more encompassing, and see how the apes turn from, you know, a mostly sign language based society into something much more advanced. I've also read several of the comics, which get into a lot of interesting things about the culture and society and all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, I am a fan, so I would like to see more. And, you know, I do think that there are more interesting stories to tell. Now, if Matt Reeves isn't part of it, that makes me scared. Also, the fact that Disney has merged with Fox makes me scared, because Disney doesn't like to take risks.
Yeah, and that's always the danger also with sequels, especially when you're trying to make sequels to such good movies. The same reason why I don't want to see another Mad Max movie. Just stop making Mad Max movies. You've perfected it. And I would say the same with the Planet of the Apes movies. What we have now is more or less a perfect franchise. And yeah, sure, it would be fun to see another one as good as War or as Dawn or as Rise or any of them. But we really run the risk of getting a really bad one instead. So that's why I'm a little cautious, or very cautious.
Yeah, I lean more to the side of optimism, but you know, I definitely see what you're saying. Because sometimes when studios get greedy, they wind up losing their artistic integrity just to make a product. And I think we're seeing that with Star Wars right now. I think they're rushing them too much. And while I do actually like what Marvel is doing, I think they have planned things out in a way that works for what they're doing. You can obviously see with DC that model doesn't transfer.
No.
You know, not everybody can follow that model.
No. And yeah, and I don't just got to say that about Marvel. Even as much as I don't like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they have succeeded in creating a like sustainable formula for a very long franchise. So kudos to them for that, I suppose. But yeah, like if they would manage to put as much care and devotion into like 3 new movies or just one movie, I don't know. I would gladly watch that. But yeah, I err more on the pessimistic side of it. Especially
I think
nowadays.
if they give it time, it could be interesting. Matt Reeves did say that he had a couple stories in the back of his mind, mainly focusing on like Bad Ape and some of the other ideas that were kind of planted in War, and you know, possibly a film about the lawgiver building himself up, Maurice being the lawgiver. So, you know, focusing more on Maurice's side, I think could be really interesting and kind of I don't know. There's some ideas just kind of floating around that I think could move the franchise in a way that would be interesting, but you need the writing, you need the time, and you rushed it, it would just be like every other bullshit franchise movie that comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what you said about that, to like, yeah, give it some time, and yeah, try to sort of distance itself from these three new ones, not to like try and make a fourth one in that franchise, if you will, but like, yeah, try to start a new trilogy or something, because yeah, these three movies about Caesar, because that's kind of the connecting tissue. Also, they have this, they really focus on one character. I think now that he's dead, that's the end of that story. So yeah, definitely they could just make another story about another ape, or about another group of apes. But yeah, try and distance it from these movies, not try to make it a part of this part of the franchise, if you will. That could work. Yeah, I would want to see that.
Yeah.
But still, still have it in the same franchise, and still try to connect it with the old ones as well as they did with these three new ones, because that's really what makes the whole thing, I would say.
Yeah, but going back,
Yeah.
the Pierre Boulle novel is actually really interesting, and that's what sparked the whole thing. I believe its direct translation is Monkey Planet.
Yeah, or Planet of the Monkeys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
Planet of the Monkeys
is really interesting because in the Planet of the Apes franchise, monkey is a very degrading phrase.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't see monkeys as equals. They're
Right.
animals. So, but I don't know. I'm no language expert, but I think it's only like English and maybe a few other countries that actually makes the distinction between monkey and ape. Because in Swedish, it's all just the same thing. It's all called apa,
Okay.
basically ape. So I guess that's why. Because Planet of the Monkeys sounds, I mean, Planet of the Apes sounds kind of corny, but Planet of the Apes sounds even cornier. So I can see why they changed it, and also because it's about a story about apes. But you've read the book, right?
Yes.
Which version do you prefer, if you will? The movie or the book?
Segments of both. I obviously like the ending of the movie way, 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 way better because they recreated that ending in the Tim Burton movie and it didn't really work.
No, it's weird. I don't think I was even able to really wrap my head around how that movie ended. It makes more sense in the book, but it's still a very weird ending. I mean, you have monkeys, apes riding around in spaceships, reading like messages in bottles and stuff. It's the book gets really weird sometimes, but again, it's not as like direct in its commentary. It's a lot more allegorical in that way. So I think the movie, for me at least, the movie makes more sense. But there are, like you said, segments of the book is like really good, really, really good.
Yeah, I like the interaction with Taylor. Is that?
Oh, he's called Ulysses, I think, or Ulysses in the book.
Yeah, I like the main character. Sorry. Yeah. I like the main character's interaction with Zira a lot in the book. I think it gets into some really interesting areas, like where they have like boxing matches where he is kind of living large for a little bit. How he's almost like a high class pet.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah, he gets like complacent in his role as an exhibition sort of, or an experiment.
Yeah, whereas like a lot of his friends, were reduced to animals, like they just became savage and they had to be lobotomized and And that carries over into the movie, but in very different ways. And I think that the movie does a really interesting job of kind of making it feel like an extended Twilight Zone episode.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. What's he called? The first writer of the script.
Rod Serling. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Rod Serling. Yeah. There's your Twilight Zone connection. Yeah,
right.
Especially that twist ending. That could have been a Twilight Zone episode. And that really works well. And I feel that the movie is like easier to connect to real world happenings more than the book. Because partly because the setting of the book is a lot more fantastical than it is in the movie. And I know they did that, but mostly because of budgetary reasons. They put it in like a what would you call it? Not medieval, like earlier times, and then this future society that you have in the book. But it also makes it easier to somehow connect to that story than in the book, I would say.
Yeah, it seems more logical that apes would have a society that kind of looks primitive. At least, with stuff like guns that are designed for ape hands. I always loved those designs of the guns that they had. Sort of clay huts that they had.
Yeah, exactly. It does make more sense, and especially with how far in the future it is, because they travel about 1,000 years into the future. So since we're still on Earth in the movie, it makes sense that they haven't progressed past like clay huts and riding on horses and stuff. In the book, they are on another planet, so that makes more sense in the book. But in the movie, it wouldn't have worked, I would say.
Now, I will say, as far as the timeline goes, I have heard the argument that we don't really know because their ship did malfunction.
That's true. But like, I always go off of the last reading he looks at. It says like 3015 or something like that. But yeah, it could have malfunctioned. It could be any place in time.
Right.
But logically, it feels like about 1,000 years after people would have like become intelligent, or apes would have become intelligent.
That seems pretty fast when you're talking about evolution, but
sure.
It's a suspension of disbelief,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
there is a lot of suspension of disbelief required.
The fact that they speak English, that is like. And nobody says anything like, why do these apes speak English? I thought we went to another planet.
Yeah. He never even it's never even mentioned. He just starts talking to them when his throat gets fixed. That is a little weird, but I guess that was also like a thing of brevity, trying not to get too technical with telling the story, keeping it simple, which I appreciate. I don't know how they solve that in the book. Is it the same thing there? They just speak the same language? I don't remember.
I could have sworn that there was a different language that he learned.
I think so too, right? I think because he talks on a more primitive level than they do. Yeah, that's right. It's another language in that one, which again makes sense because it's a completely different planet. But right. you can kind of forgive it in the movie because it's Earth, I suppose. The apes heard people talk. I don't know. But yeah, it's one of those things. Especially since the movie it was made in the 60s. I don't think people still aren't that happy with subtitles. At least not in America, from what I've heard.
Oh my God. I remember. It's really frustrating because I went to film school, and one of the most frustrating thing to hear from film students, because you expect something a little bit more from film students, but to hear some people saying, "Oh, I don't watch black and white movies." What? Oh, I don't watch silent films. What? Oh, I don't like subtitles in my movies. You know,
Yeah, you're severely limiting yourself.
Exactly. And then you wonder why every single movie you see seems pretty much the same. And then you're like, huh, I can predict all these movies. And it's like, no, you can't predict these movies. I mean, you can't just predict movies. It's the fact that you've been seeing the same movie over and over again.
Yeah.
Because it's a Hollywood formula that works.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of formulas, the Planet of the Apes movies, they sort of, except for Beneath the Planet of the Apes, they never really followed a formula, which is also an interesting thing about the franchise. It was constantly like changing up how they framed the story, how they told the story, which also I think has a lot to do with why they have such staying power. They have sort of, yes, they have stayed relevant because they constantly reinvented themselves, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, except for Beneath. Beneath is still interesting. It's probably my least favorite if we're not counting the Tim Burton one, because it is more or less like a retread of the first one.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, while I do think the stuff with people who worship the bomb and the ending are really interesting and challenge what a sequel can be. It does heavily lean on the cheese factor, which is something that I think they dialed back on a lot with other movies. Now, I know some people will argue that about the last film, Battle 4, but honestly, I think Beneath is the weakest as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, because like I said, it is very much a retread of the first one. And I know I was rewatching some of the documentaries on the Blu-ray box, and they said that they wanted to, which feels very like contemporary. They wanted to recreate the success of the first one, and that's even more interesting because they did. I mean, the Beneath made even more money in the box office, I think, than the first one. But then they had enough like belief in their producers and their screenwriters to actually let them write a movie like Escape, that is insane. You will not see that in a big Hollywood franchise today. To go from a very true and tried formula for the first two movies and then make a completely different movie in the third one. I mean, they don't even do that with the new ones. They while they're very well made, they do follow a certain formula, all three of them.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you to a certain extent on that, but we'll get into that later.
Okay.
But it is really interesting also that Planet of the Apes essentially was the first franchise to sell toys.
Yeah.
It predates Star Wars. Star Wars later followed that model, but it was the first franchise that actually attempted to cross into the toy market, and that was because of laws that changed, because originally you couldn't make a movie or a television show to sell toys. That was an American law for a while, and then when the law changed, that's when you started getting all kinds of television shows and franchises that were purely marketed to sell toys, like He-Man and Transformers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I own some of the old Transformers shows, and it's insane. At least in the earlier episodes, every time one of the Transformers transform, the kid character Sparkplug, he goes, "Amazing!" Every time someone transforms, that is just clearly an ad for toys. Which is, I guess that's a good thing they didn't really have that for Planet of the Apes, because it is, very like toy friendly. I would say, like, you have the villages and all the different characters, and I mean, apes who ride horses.
Though I always thought it was weird because it was a franchise that was marketed to kids, but the subject matter is so dark. Especially when you get into the later films, like you get into the third movie where they just kill Zira and Cornelius, just gun them down.
Yeah, they shoot an infant. They shoot an infant ape in that one. That's pretty disturbing. He just like fires into the baby. And the same thing with the first and the second one. I mean, there's like they're super violent, but I don't know that you see that with a lot of other movies as well. I know they made toys out of the Rambo movies, which is also like, really?
Well,
they made a cartoon show about that.
One of the things that I've loved about the Planet of the Apes is there's a consequence to violence that you don't see in other franchises.
Yeah, that's true.
Violence is always a last resort in the Planet of the Apes franchise, except to humans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But we as far as the apes are concerned, they are a relatively pacifist society. The rule ape shall not kill ape is held true, and it's really fascinating that Dawn really challenges that idea.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Where do you stand on how Caesar deals with that final thing when Koba says ape does not kill ape, and he says you're not ape, and then just lets go. I mean, I understand why he does it, and I think it works, but it was kind of like, oh, really? He's just gonna say no, you're not ape, and then we'll basically kill him. I don't know.
Well,
it's interesting, but I'm not sure it fully works for the character.
Well, and in the third movie, he becomes a hypocrite. So like, I like it because it shows the flaw in his character, that even though he holds up an ideology, he can't fight it.
Yeah.
He can't fight his impulse to commit revenge, to let somebody die, even though it goes against the rules that he stuck to. So I think it works. It is something that's a little bit challenging because, he breaks his own rule.
And I just started thinking about it. It makes sense also then that they follow up on that in the next movie where he's very guilt-ridden about killing Koba. I mean, he even like sees his ghost. Those scenes are they're really haunting. That does make sense. I wasn't really thinking about that.
Yeah, it's a really smart franchise, and I like the fact that it seems to have gotten more sophisticated as it's gone along. Rise is probably your most simple movie out of the entire franchise. It's basically an escape movie.
Yeah,
there's a lot more to it than that, but bare bones, it's an escape movie.
And it kind of correlates with as the apes and as Caesar gets more intelligent, the movies get more into the morals and the ethics of what is going on in the movies. So I guess it's a logical continuation of the themes in the movies.
Now, getting back to what we were talking about of being topical, how each of the films has been topical to issues of the modern era. I think it's really interesting that the old franchise was clearly and blatantly about race. to the point where it has raised some controversy now because, I mean, of course, the downside is ape has been a sort of derogatory phrase given to Black people. So to have a franchise that is that thinly veiled has some issues today. And and the whole idea of, you know, flipping society. Oh, what would happen if Black people took over white people? You know, it does allude to those ideas that like racists fear in the United States. But I think it does it with a lot more elegance than some people might credit it as today.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, because you have to look at it through an historic lens. I mean, I wasn't even born back then, but people weren't as what should I say? Racially sensitive back then in the same way as we are now. I mean, yeah. So they wanted to make a story about racism, but I mean, back then racism was an entirely different thing than it is now, or it was more blatant than it is now. And of course, a movie back in the 60s, even if it tries to be anti-racist, might come off as a bit racist by today's standards. It makes sense. But I guess, yeah, that's something you have to kind of look past to really get the most out of the movies.
Well, what I've always thought was fascinating and something that I would like to see the franchise get into a little bit more is the idea that the apes are separate but equal. That you have the orangutans who are at the highest place in society. Then you have the gorillas who are like the military class. And then you have the chimpanzees at the bottom. I always thought that was fascinating, you know, especially now that we have the new franchise, which has the chimp at the top. So what caused the shift?
Yeah. That could be interesting. To see, to kind of see the apes sort of make the same mistake humans did when it comes to race and stuff like that. That's true. That could be interesting. But what was I gonna say? No. Oh,
sorry.
I forgot. No, I had something. It disappeared. It got away from me. Really lost my train of thought. What was I gonna say? Damn it. Oh, okay, whatever. I'm gonna try to find words again. Oh no, I'm blanking. Do you have anything to start the conversation up again? I am completely blanking. Yeah, sorry.
So getting on to Escape from the Planet of the Apes, just because we barely touched it. It's kind of the most unique film out of the entire franchise because almost all of the other films are centered around conflict, and Escape from the Planet of the Apes is mostly light. You know, it's like, hey, we're gonna go shopping and we're gonna hang out, and like, isn't it cool that they're talking apes? You know, obviously it gets darker you know, as the film progresses, but you know, it's just such an anomaly in the franchise. Like, how did this movie get made? You know, and how do you make a sequel when you blow up the world in the last one? Oh, well, the ship, they managed to fix the ship in like what, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And then travel back in time. Yeah, you know, it's a stretch. But
it is a bit of a logical leap. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the trailer for that one, just thinking it was a like straight up comedy, and I thought, oh no, this is where the franchise turns sour. But then I saw the movie, and I know the screenwriter and the director, they weren't at odds, but they had different visions of the movie. The screenwriter was much more on the pessimistic side of humans, like making the same mistakes over again, like killing Cornelius and Sierra, and kind of starting the history that they told us about in the beginning of the movie, or in the middle of the movie, I suppose. And I know the director, whose name escapes me, he focused much more on the I guess the romance or the love story between Cornelius and Sierra. But I think ultimately the movie balances those two very well, because it is centered very much around those two characters, but it also tells this story of like starting the origin story almost of this future Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, and manages to shift the franchise, because after that point, the franchise has been centered around the apes and not the humans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a polar shift. That movie, it flips it. Going back to doing something completely different and still like making something good out of it, taking risks. That's something I would like to see if they make more movies in the franchise, like really taking risks, not just trying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, now I will say I have been reading the comics, and I know this is like diverting a little bit, but it has been fascinating, because I'm reading one centered around the point of view of General Ursus.
Mm-hmm. Are these like, because I know there were comics in like the 80s. Are these new comics, or are these the old comics?
These are brand new comics. They're coming out like they're coming out monthly, and they parallel the film. So you'll see moments of the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston and stuff like that, but it's from General Ursus's point of view, as well as Dr. Zaius and everything. So it's really fascinating. And this summer, they're actually releasing a comic original script that they had for the movie.
Okay. Your audio cut out for a second. Based on what script?
The original script that they had for the movie.
Oh, for the original movie.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Before their budget got cut and everything.
Oh, so it's just going to be like a future setting.
Yeah.
Huh. That's cool.
I kind of hope that more films do this, like, this sort of visionary idea of, hey, this is what this movie could have looked like if we had the budget for it. And just kind of explore it with comic books.
Yeah. I know they've done sort of similar things. I read a couple of years ago, I read the novelization of Tim Burton's Batman. And that has some like cut scenes in it. Just speaking about that, and speaking of cut scenes, there's actually a daylight scene where Batman rides a horse shooting an Uzi at the Joker. Just thought about it. So that is it's an interesting way to show what the movie could have been like.
Yeah,
and why they cut it. So we talked about. We'll keep speaking about the franchise, more about the rest of the franchise. There are a couple of video games. I don't know. Have you played any of them? I know you watched a trailer for the new one. I saw that on your YouTube channel.
Yeah. No, I haven't played any of the new ones. Okay. I do want to play the Telltale inspired one. That's
Frontier or something.
Yeah, Last Frontier.
Last Frontier. Yeah.
That looks pretty good. I heard the gameplay wasn't like incredibly intuitive, but it's a choose your own adventure style thing. I will really like it, but I can't say much for other people.
No.
They have had some bad games.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you saw Angry Video Game Nerd.
Oh yeah, he reviewed the one based on, it was based on Tim Burton's movie, right? The Tim Burton movie.
It was, and it was based on the original as well. So it was like the original movie, but with the look of the new movie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a mess.
It was broken. The game itself was broken. Like you couldn't get further into the game.
That's weird. That's that the movies. Well, yeah, that the movies are so good that the games are broken. But I guess they usually are when it comes to video game tie-ins to movies. I'm glad they didn't make more of those.
Video game tie-ins almost never work, but like when you have a video game that's based on like an older property, like the Mad Max game, it can work because that game was amazing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say amazing, but it was a lot of fun. One game, tangent here again. One game I would say really works and sort of like becomes its own thing is the Spider-Man 2. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, the game based on that movie. I don't know if you played it.
Oh yeah.
That is an amazing game.
Yeah.
I would probably say it's the only like video game tie-in game that is actually really, really good. Otherwise they range from like crap to mediocre. So there is one exception, but I suppose that that just confirms the rule, I suppose.
Yeah.
So getting into the new ones and talking some about the achievements of the new ones, because I know there's been at least since Dawn came out that mocap actors should be able to be nominated for Academy Awards. What is your stance on that? I don't know if we talked about that before.
I don't know either. I think they should because, quite frankly, if Gary Oldman can get an Oscar for being in heavy makeup, then I think a mocap actor should be able to get an Oscar for giving a motion capture performance, because there isn't a ton of difference between what they're actually doing. And I would say that motion capture actors actually demand a lot more from the actor because they have to exaggerate their emotions to actually get a read. So it is interesting because like when you watch Andy Serkis perform, it's almost a hyper emotive style of acting. Like it, and I think it's a lot more nuanced. It just seems like there's a lot more effort put into motion capture performance than just a pure heavy makeup performance. Because you know that there are cameras that are reading every single twitch in your face, and you're trying to give the most to the artist to enhance that later.
Yeah, exactly.
I was extremely disappointed that we talked about this during our Oscar show, but yeah, I was extremely disappointed that Blade Runner 2049 beat it because while War for the Planet of the Apes did not draw attention to its special effects, its special effects were breathtaking to the point of photorealism in many points of the film.
Yeah, and they achieve that, which every like special effect heavy movie should achieve. That you don't even think about it. You weren't like, oh, the apes look so lifelike. It's like, oh, these characters are really interesting. This is what we were thinking. So
yeah, and the franchise has really stepped it up with each film. Like the first one was like really impressive, but you know there were some issues with motion. You could obviously tell that they were CGI pretty much throughout the entire movie.
Sure,
especially during the early parts of the movie. But like once Dawn came out, it was like, wow, we are getting to a whole new thing with motion capture performances and like what movies can be.
Yeah, exactly, and that is also something running throughout the entire franchise. The technical aspects and the acting with the makeup, because I also heard that it was like just understood that you couldn't win an Oscar if you were in a costume like that or in heavy makeup like that, because it wasn't really acting; it was just a mask. I know Orson Welles turned down the role of Ursus in Beneath because he said actors don't wear masks. So I guess that's always been like a thing, but I think they've continually proven that you can act really well and use the masks and the costumes to your advantage, especially with Kim Hunter and Roddy McDowall.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we can't talk about performances under makeup without hailing Roddy McDowall as being the center of the franchise. Without Roddy McDowall, Planet of the Apes wouldn't be what it is today. And I do think that who played Zira?
Kim Hunter.
Kim Hunter. Yeah. Those Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter cement the franchise. And granted, Dr. J.S. does an amazing job, but the fact that Roddy McDowall stuck with the franchise, even going to television, really speaks true to how much he cared about the actual project and how much he. I love the fact that the apes don't really necessarily look like apes in that franchise, but he adds such small nuances to his performance. Like, he'll lower his arms a little bit more. He'll, move his mask. Like, there's this thing that he does with his nose and mouth throughout the franchise that I just think was a very important and sort of great characteristic that he added to, give her more emotion to really make you feel that this is a living, breathing thing instead of just a guy in a costume.
Yeah, and the same thing as with the motion capture, that they really only had their eyes and I guess their voice to work with, because the rest was kind of like stuck in the mask. So they really had to emote when it came to the more emotional scenes, and they make a great job of it.
And one story that I heard was when they did test screenings for this movie, they basically said, if anybody laughs, we're not making the movie.
Okay.
And nobody laughed. Now, I'm sure audiences today, you're going to get that one person. But I'm glad that nobody laughed at that original test screening, because we might not have this franchise.
No, exactly. Yeah. and it shows that even though the makeup is very basic or rudimentary, it worked, and it's also a compliment to the actors because they made it work. That because with lesser actors or with lesser director, it could come off really silly because they look kind of ridiculous if you think about it. Especially the chimp masks, they look kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a testament to how much they cared about the movie. Testament to the whole franchise.
And then Andy Serkis, having a history in motion capture acting, has really revolutionized this. And I forget what his studio is called, but he now has a motion capture studio.
Yeah.
Where he trains people, and Terry Notary is one of the major proponents for motion capture acting now. If you saw the movie, what was it? The Square.
Yeah.
He gives his performance as an ape without the motion capture suit, and that was really fun to see.
Yeah,
he played Rocket in the Planet of the Apes films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very interesting. But yeah, just going back to that discussion. I mean, I remember even like, I haven't seen that movie in a long time now, but I remember even back in 2006, I think I saw the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and Bill Nighy playing Davy Jones, doing like a tremendous job for that kind of movie. And I was thinking, oh man, he should get like a nomination for something, but yeah, they disregarded him because he was like covered in a squid, I suppose. So I mean, it's just as much acting. It's just that they put a digital mask over it, so it shouldn't really matter. But for some reason, it does.
It's elitist bullshit. Like, I also think it's kind of ridiculous that, I can see one way and I can see the other, but, the Oscars don't really recognize movies that aren't of a certain type.
Yeah.
Like when the films get nominated, there aren't a lot of surprises. It's going to be a period drama. It's going to be, something having to do with some sort of social issue, war, etc.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of that in the latest one as well. And Gary Oldman won because of that. I say, if he would just have played like a random guy, not Winston Churchill, he wouldn't have won, I think.
Yeah, I liked his performance, but the more I thought of it, the more I think that Daniel Day-Lewis should have won that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we talked about this too. Won
most of the awards. This isn't Phantom Thread podcast, so we'll get back to the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah,
but yeah, I also think that wow, I'm doing terrible with names right now. The actor who played Koba.
Toby Kebbell.
Toby Kebbell. Yeah, that's it. He was really amazing in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that I really appreciated about his performance is, unlike Andy Serkis, he really added a more animalistic style to his performance, which is, moving the franchise a little bit more to, unlike the original series, to make the characters more ape-like. And I think they've done a good job of incorporating our understanding of the biology as well as the behaviors of apes that they just didn't know at that time.
Yeah, exactly. It feels more grounded, if you can say that.
The
portrayal.
I know this sounds like blasphemy, but I wouldn't mind a straight up remake of the original with more realistic apes, like how we see in this franchise. I know it's blasphemy for me to say, but
well, if we're talking about continuing the franchise, at some point that is like the logical leap to make, or logical move to make, to sort of remake it, or not straight up remake, but sort of tell that story again if they're going to continue with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they continue with the franchise that's going to happen eventually.
Yeah, and possibly patch up some of the stuff with Beneath, fix that.
Yeah.
Especially going down the line with those, just patching things up, make a more interesting ape society than you had in Battle. Is interesting, but I think, especially with what we know now, taking those concepts now that we know how the society has been developed, that could be really interesting to revisit, which we kind of got in War. War did kind of feel like a more realized Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Oh yeah, there is a lot of correlations between those two, definitely.
Which I will say, like, if you go forward, you do run the risk of retreading a little too much.
Yeah. Okay. um, but what was I gonna say then? Well, yeah, exactly. That is well, like we said before, it is yeah, like the risk of retreading it too much, and um, taking it even further. Say they would continue that story of or that line of thinking and try to like sort of remake the old ones. They were just started thinking about how would they do Escape from the Planet of the Apes today, if or in say 10 years. How would that look? I don't know. Could that work in the same way as it did back in the 70s?
I think the society underground in the Forbidden Zone would be a lot more realized.
Mm.
I think you could do a lot more interesting things and be a lot less basic. And I don't know, but when I saw War, when I saw the guys covered from head to toe in the white outfits, that's all I could think. I was like, one of them takes off the mask,
Oh
and they could be these people. We don't know.
no, yeah, that's
So
true.
that was just something interesting to think about. Like, could these be that society later on?
Yeah. Um, but that's also one of just thinking about that. One of the few things that I didn't like about War for the Planet of the Apes, just to go a little bit in detail on that one, was the way they explained that humans were going primal and apes were evolving, because they don't really go deep in it in the original movie, but when they explain it at the end of that movie, they explained like it was a longer progress of people going from what we are now to what they become in Planet of the Apes. But in War, they sort of like they almost become feral, not overnight, but I mean over a much like shorter amount of time. And I thought that was like simplifying the whole thing of humans becoming animals and apes becoming humans. And I don't know if they were like trying to connect all the dots like too much, almost between the War and the original. What was your stance on that? What do you think about that story beat, if you will?
I really like it. I can certainly see your criticism with it because, it does have some logical issues. That being said, I think that the story that Colonel McCullough speaks of with his son,
Mm.
it it works. As far as his character goes, the fact that like he feels that society is devolving and he doesn't want to get to that level, so that's why he's fighting. He's fighting for selfish reasons.
Oh yeah.
As Likewise, Caesar is fighting for selfish reasons. It's all about the selfishness of humanity. I think that's the real theme of War for the Planet of the Apes. How, we think we're a part of a group, but we only care for our own well-being,
Mm. Yeah,
our
exactly.
own ideologies and such. So as far as the disease devolving that quickly, um, if this is the end of the franchise, then I'm okay with it because we're not going to get any more from
No.
that. So if that's, but like you said, it does seem to happen almost overnight. Yes, but I will say 10 years have passed since the last one, which did add a little bit of time. And I like the fact that like each film did space itself out so
Mm.
that there are stories to be told in between where each one was, and that each film could actually feel like its own separate entity rather than something that you had to watch in a particular order.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, especially Rise and War. They really work as they have like a proper beginning, middle, and end. Dawn as well, but it definitely feels like a middle chapter of a trilogy. Where Rise and War works better as its own movie, if you will.
Yeah.
But just quickly, sort of why I also thought that the whole virus thing being a bit too simplistic is that you do have the images of the soldiers when they're when he's having his speech up there on the balcony, and they're just standing there looking at him, and they're all just like screaming, "They are the Alpha and the Omega, and we are the last stand for before this becomes a Planet of the Apes." And they're just at the end of the rally speech, they're all just like screaming their heads off, and I felt that was like a good image of humans turning into animals. They're just becoming these like violent animals, just fighting for survival. So I thought, yeah, it's a really good imagery for how humans have devolved over the course of these like 15 years or 20 years or whatever it is. So I thought that could have been a good way to tell why humans devolved. But then they had the virus thing as well. So I don't know. I like that imagery better. That's why I didn't particularly like the virus thing.
Well, I was actually kind of curious how humans got to the point where they didn't speak anymore. And while Beneath does have Nova talk at the end, I kind of felt that there was actually something wrong with the humans. Like that was always my read, that like there was something that inhibited their ability to speak other than just whenever they found one that spoke, like they just killed them or lobotomized them.
Okay.
Well, you get to the TV show and just everybody talks and it's kind of weird. So
yeah, yeah, I did. I remember you. Yeah, you told me I should watch that. I did watch it a little bit, but that one is kind of silly. I didn't get through it all.
Yeah, I haven't finished it yet either, but I intend to. It's just not to the quality of the films.
No, it is very ambitious for a TV show in the like 80s or early 80s. Yeah. It is very ambitious, but it doesn't quite work for me. But yeah, okay, yeah, and I was always of the mind that people had just like they had lost their speech over generations because of everything that happened. So yeah, I guess we came from two different viewpoints. I guess that's why we have two different viewpoints on the virus and war. Would make sense, I suppose.
But I like the fact that there is somewhat of an explanation to kind of parallel the original film and this last film.
Yeah. And yeah, they make like a very good what's the word? No, they make a very good job of turning it into a full circle, like I said before, which very few franchises nowadays do. I'm curious to see. I know they're not going to wrap it up, but to see what they do to kind of end this part of the franchise with Infinity War in the Marvel movies, to see if they sort of wrap it up somehow. Some sort of morbid curiosity for that. But I mean, other franchises that have come and gone have not done as good a job as War did with wrapping up a franchise. Even like my favorite trilogy of later year, the Dark Knight trilogy, doesn't do as well a job of wrapping it up. The ending of Dark Knight Rises feels kind of forced, unfortunately.
Well, yeah. Speaking of that, sorry, going off into another tangent. Just bring in Hugo Strange. We need that franchise back because the DC universe doesn't know what they're doing. Bring in Hugo Strange, out him in Paris, and we have Batman again.
Okay. But okay, yeah, just quickly then, do you think there is a future for the DC cinematic universe? Do you
No,
think
they
there?
need to kill it.
Yeah.
They need to kill it. I including Wonder Woman. I know I'm in the minority opinion with that, but I'm sorry. Sarah Connor, hell, even Charlize Theron in um, Atomic Blonde is more impressive. Gal Gadot does not have the physical ability to be impressive, and you can throw all the CGI you want on her, and she just won't impress me. And I think this new movie with Kristen Wiig as the cheetah is going to kill the franchise. And
Mm,
if Wonder Woman fails, then the whole entire DCEU fails. Now I think they're going to keep the franchise going so long as Wonder Woman is part of the franchise. But if Wonder Woman fails, then they have to start over.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that one. I did like Wonder Woman, but they would have to, because they couldn't carry Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman over to a new franchise. That would just be even weirder than that franchise already is. So
Well,
yeah, they
and
should just kill it all.
she wasn't really impressive in Justice League.
No, 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 no. Wonder Woman does not work in any other movie. At least for me, it doesn't work in any other movie than the Wonder Woman standalone. She's boring in Batman vs Superman. Everyone's boring in that. And everyone, including her, is terrible in Justice League. So yeah,
Well, she's not an actress.
no, not originally.
She's a model,
Yeah,
and she takes good direction from good directors, and
yeah,
uh, Zack Snyder doesn't know how to get a good female actress to save his life. He got lucky with Lena Headey in 300.
yes, yes. I was gonna say that. What about Lena Headey? But yeah, yeah. Just look at Sucker Punch. Speaking of
Yeah,
female actors, ah,
that was
oh,
supposed to be a feminist movie, by the way.
yeah. Oh, oh, yeah. I got to continue this tangent a little bit because
Yeah.
there's a super sad story about me in
Yeah.
that movie. Because I was a huge Zack Snyder fan. Up until I saw Sucker Punch. 300 is still one of my favorite movies. Whatever. I really like Watchmen. Not as much now as I did back then, though. I have rewatched it and I'm like, it doesn't really work. But back then, it was like some of my favorite movies. He was my favorite director, and he was coming to Sweden to present an early screening of Sucker Punch. And me and my sister got tickets for it, and I was so excited. I mean, he had like a short Q&A, and I got to ask him a question. It was so amazing. And then he said, I hope you enjoy my movie. This is my most personal movie. I wrote the script, I directed it. It's not based on a comic. It's my movie. And everyone started watching. 2 hours later, it was like, oh no, Zack Snyder, what did you do? You ruined it. And it was so terrible because he was there presenting it. It all just fell apart for me. And after that, he hasn't done anything even remotely interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I liked aspects of Man of Steel, but
Sure. Sure.
I would say out of all the movies that he's directed in the DCEU, that is definitely his best.
Mm. Mm. That's not saying much.
No, it isn't. They they need to kill that franchise with fire because right now it looks like this winter they're going to drown it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I know they have to make, or they needed to make one before now. They should just scrap it. But yeah, they have to make an Aquaman movie now. But yeah, if they try to reboot the franchise, they should go the Planet of the Apes route. Like,
Well,
take care about the movies. Care about the movies.
Now, speaking of the Planet of the Apes franchise, we have been told that Matt Reeves is directing a Batman trilogy.
Is that still happening?
I don't know.
No, because I heard that rumor a long time ago.
Yes, and I even heard Matt Reeves talk and speak about it and say that he was working on it and he was developing some ideas and he was thinking that Jake Gyllenhaal was going to play Batman, um, which I think is interesting. I honestly would like Jake Gyllenhaal to play a Joker more than anything. After seeing Nightcrawler, yes, he would make a great Joker. Because good God, I don't want to see Jared Leto's Joker anymore.
No.
I
embarrassing.
I thought he was a great choice for the Joker when I first heard of it because he seemed like an actor with range and everything. And
and I know the way they teased him, he seemed to be a very interesting Joker, but then what little he is in Suicide Squad, he is just terrible. But I wonder how much that is the material though, because he doesn't really have much to work with.
Yeah, and he did way too much method acting for that film, which method acting that didn't even really deliver. Like,
exactly, he's in 5 minutes.
You heard all these stories about like all this crazy stuff he did, and then it's like, okay, great. Now, what does he actually give? Yeah. Exactly. What were all those used condoms and anal beads for when like you couldn't even give a good performance in the movie that you were in?
Yeah. I don't know. No. And once again, going back to Planet of the Apes, that is how you do a franchise the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You take the time you need to write a proper script, do the pre-production, and actually get directors and producers who care about the material, which they have done consistently since 1968. So,
and one of the things that I like about the new franchise, the new trilogy, a little bit more than the old franchise, is they know when to just make it a movie. They know how to get the character to shut up. And I love the concept of sign language in the films because that allows everything to be more visual. And it's always, going back to that. And it really adds a very distinct style that, fortunately, I actually saw recreated pretty well in a movie that I saw last night, A Quiet Place.
Oh, okay.
And that was a movie that was almost completely quiet.
Yeah,
the entire movie, and they use sign language and everything.
Yeah, I saw it Friday night. So yeah, I wasn't as impressed as you sound. But I did like that, and it was definitely, it did add a lot of gravitas to the visuals. They focused a lot on visuals. I thought the photography was amazing. But I'm writing my review, not as we speak, but I was writing it a little bit earlier. So that's probably my next video coming out. So I'll get into what I didn't like about it in that video. But I thought it was a good movie. I thought the concept was great. And I was curious to see how long they would actually go before someone actually spoke. So spoilers, they do speak a little bit, but like 90% is sign language. That is really cool.
I like the fact that they committed to it, and I was afraid that they wouldn't.
No, they would like start whispering, or I don't know. But they did commit to it.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I like about the Planet of the Apes franchise. Like they really commit to their CG animation, in motion capture and everything like that. And whereas most other franchises, and where the franchise actually was headed in the second film, if Rupert Wyatt directed Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the franchise would have actually turned back to the humans.
Oh, okay.
And they spoke with Matt Reeves. I forget what caused the director shift. Oh, it was the writers. The writers wanted to make it more about the apes, and Rupert Wyatt wanted to make it about the humans. And so the writers canned him. and got Matt Reeves, who was a fan of the Planet of the Apes, and said he wanted to make the film about the apes. And then he had some ideas, and Weta Studios developed the technology so that he was able to film the actors actually on location and not on just a soundstage, which I think is a real testament to why these films work so well, is because most CGI films, they shoot on a soundstage.
Mm.
The Planet of the Apes franchise, especially with War and Dawn, they shoot on location, which really adds a lot of depth and shadow, and a real sense of space that you can't do on a soundstage. You can try as hard as you can to get the best actors to pretend, but when you're actually doing it, it works a lot better. And in the third movie, I don't know if you've seen behind the scenes, but like it was really that cold outside.
Oh yeah,
like they were,
yeah.
yeah.
It's yeah, and it shows. Yeah, it lets them act even more than they can on a soundstage, because they have all the elements to work with.
Yeah, like when he gets when Caesar gets water poured on him, they actually poured cold water on him outside in that weather, so that he could give the performance for that, and not just pretend that which would have been, you would have seen it. You would have been able to see the acting and not a more realistic reaction.
Yeah, and then that's what makes we're talking about with the directors, like actually caring about these movies. Like, I want to get the best performance out of my actors. What do I have to do that? Well, we shoot it out in the real world instead of shooting on a soundstage. Like every aspect, especially about War, which is, I think for me the best one of the three new ones. There's so much care and attention to detail about every little thing in that movie. I feel it. Yeah, it got a little bit sidelined when it comes to the summer blockbuster movies, which is weird because it's such a good movie.
Yeah, I really wish it had made more money in the box office, because I think out of the movies that deserve to get the recognition, I would rather have a movie that takes risks, and War for the Planet of the Apes takes risks, especially for a summer blockbuster. Torturing your main character as much as you do in that film, I liked. Some people had issues with the fact that it's called War, and there's skirmishes and stuff. I would say that if you listen to Matt Reeves' Q&A, there's a podcast called the Q&A podcast. He said specifically that it was a state of mind, and not necessarily something as explicit as, oh, this is the war for the planet.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think that it is a pretty clever, a clever name for the movie, and I guess they technically could have called it Battle for the Planet of the Apes, but there already is a battle for the Planet of the Apes, so they couldn't do that. Yeah, but I think it is a good thing that they don't go for that trope of ending the trilogy with a war, like we see in every other trilogy capper. There's always like a war, and you don't have as much character development as you have in the other movies. It's just action.
Well, and the movie subverts your expectations. You're expecting this sweeping revenge story, and Caesar doesn't even get his chance for revenge, because McCullough then loses his voice, and there's that like really powerful scene where he goes to McCullough and he doesn't kill him.
No,
he lets him kill himself, but he doesn't have that moment of revenge that he craved for.
Oh yeah, but he sees past that. It isn't about revenge anymore. He realizes that what is it? Well, that it won't satisfy it won't quench his anger. There's no point to the revenge, and it makes sense.
But in typical blockbuster movies, you would have him die in probably the most gruesome way you could think of in a PG-13 movie, mind you. Most movies would go in the other direction, and have it be an audience, this amazing moment where, he gets his revenge and then they walk off into the sunset.
Exactly. You have the audience cheer and clap and everything.
Yeah, but you have that moment when he throws the grenade and then you're like cheering. But then he gets shot immediately afterwards. Like I really like the fact that War for the Planet of the Apes really felt in spirit to the older Planet of the Apes films more than any of the films before it.
Yeah, exactly. Focusing on not just the spectacle and the action, even though it is technically a war movie. And I just thought about that right now, about the calling the movie War for the Planet of the Apes. I guess what we see is sort of like the effects of a war. I mean, you have communities like torn apart. You have your families being killed and everything. So while you're not seeing the war, you're seeing the effects of a war and what it does to people. So it works in that.
Yeah, it's a lot more the Deer Hunter than like Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in a while. Like overall, there is not much to complain about when it comes to Planet of the Apes, which is the entire franchise, which is very rare when it comes to a franchise that has been going on for this long. Now there isn't that many movies. If you're thinking about it's been 50 years, and there's only technically 8 movies. No, 9 movies technically. But still, every movie except for the Tim Burton one actually being relevant, well made, and interesting is. I mean, I can't think of another franchise that does that. There are some trilogies like Back to the Future, but as a franchise going past the trilogy, there aren't any, I would say, that does that as well as Planet of the Apes does.
And Back to the Future definitely takes a dip with that last Western movie.
Sure.
As far as like trilogies go, this is the Caesar trilogy is definitely one of my favorite trilogies as a franchise. Planet of the Apes is very solid. I mean, you have Toy Story. That's a very good franchise. I'm really worried about Toy Story 4 though. I don't want them to ruin what I thought was a perfect ending for Toy Story 3. But I mean, a lot of franchises usually hit a snag at some point. And Planet of the Apes did have that one really awful movie. I think they've hit some bumps, but I don't think any of the films were like total misses. Other than the Tim Burton one.
Sure. And that if you want to get super nitpicky, it's not part of the timeline, so it's kind of not part of the franchise. I know,
which is it's great that we can just accept that as not part of the timeline at all and just move past it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it does stick out like a sore thumb in that franchise. So that's like why because I am in general like against franchises, but Planet of the Apes is one that I do fully commit to and really, really, really love, and that is because so much care is being put into each movie. Even though I'm, like I said before, I'm not super positive to them continuing it. I am bit more hopeful now than I was when I first heard about it. Because I know that they can do like they can they can revitalize the franchise many years later and do it very well. So I'm hoping they will do that if they start it up again. But let it rest a little bit. Don't go crazy, like making it in like 2 years or something.
Especially with this whole Disney merger thing, because
Yeah,
right now Disney owns Planet of the Apes because they merged with Fox, and they've been pushing the X-Men movies back, which I don't know if it has to do with quality or whether it has to do with content. It could be a mixture of both. I'm pretty sure that Deadpool is a franchise that they might try to drive into the dirt. Partly because of the horrible death that happened on set.
I haven't heard about this.
A woman stunt driver was killed on the set of Deadpool 2. This happened last year, halted production, and there was a lot of foul play. I don't know if anybody's going to be charged. Basically, it was kind of like the Uma Thurman case. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No, yeah, I've heard about it.
They wanted her to do a certain stunt that she wasn't trained for, and she died in the process. So hopefully they give her in memoriam in the credits, because she certainly deserves it. It's one of those stunts are definitely one of the most underappreciated art forms in cinema. Because people risk their lives to thrill us, and fortunately that hasn't happened with the Planet of the Apes franchise, and there's a lot of stunts that go on. Did you know that in War for the Planet of the Apes, all the guns were actually firing real ammunition?
Really?
Yes.
Blanks, I assume.
No.
What? They fire real bullets.
At the beginning of the movie, when there's that huge battle where they're firing up the hill, they were firing live rounds.
Oh, okay. Because I know they mentioned that the guns are really realistic, and they test it out, and you hear the sound is like it's cutting out because it's so loud. But I didn't know it was real bullets. Yeah, that's kind of nuts. People die that way. You heard of Brandon Lee?
If they're all pointing in one direction, yes, you do need a gun handler on set for that. Several, especially with how many you have. That's a big risk, because it's really easy to be dumb with a gun. Especially if you're not trained. I trained with firearms for 5 years, so I definitely think that, you can be responsible with it, but, with that many people firing that many weapons, it's a risk. I'm glad that they included it, because whenever they actually use real guns in movies, it always has an impact that feels a lot less glorifying.
Yeah.
I think. Because real weapons are a lot scarier and a lot less glamorous than Hollywood and films usually portray them as.
Yeah, and that goes with the theme of that movie. They're not glorifying war; they're showing the terror that is war, how terrible it is.
Which is really interesting in this modern era, because we seem to go back and forth, especially in the United States, with pro-war and anti-war. Our films are sort of a muddled mishmash of sort of this jingoistic, war porn atmosphere, and then you have movies that are a lot more nuanced, that are kind of challenging it. And sometimes you have movies that are trying to do one thing but really doing the other thing, like Hacksaw Ridge, which is the most violent movie I've ever seen about pacifism.
Yeah, that is really weird. It's super violent, but guns are bad, guys. Guns are bad.
But it's done in a way that like everything looks awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the wrong director to make a pacifist movie, because Mel Gibson shoots war and action really well. So
and I know a lot of people had complaints with the third movie, the fact that like there weren't more apes on tanks and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you got that in the second movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Not trying to retread.
Yeah, and it's not about the spectacle. It's about the story. It's about the characters. So
yeah, and honestly, like I love spectacle in movies, but
sure.
I really wish that more movies focused on their characters, which it seems like oftentimes you have to have one or the other. When it comes to a lot of films made by the studio.
Yeah. And I was gonna say that there's like you said, I also really appreciate like spectacle and like big dumb action movies, but there's a time and place for action, and there's a time and place for character and story. And War for the Planet of the Apes, or the Planet of the Apes movies, they definitely fall on the side of character and story, but they have done a good job of working in spectacle where it fits. Mm-hmm. Another aspect that they do really well.
Yeah, and I really think that they've found a way to really revolutionize how cinematography is done for that specific style of acting. It kind of blows my mind how much they actually capture from the motion capture. And just kind of like paint over it. There's certain things that just kind of boggle my mind on like how you can have the two work.
Yeah, that is, just to quickly go back to awards and nominations about that. The technical aspect of filming a movie usually gets sidelined when it comes to like the cinematography awards. Like you have in especially in Dawn and War, like the technical aspects of getting everything to work in sync as well as it does is like a feat in and of its own, which should have been more appreciated. I remember like what was it? It was one of the Christopher Nolan movies where the Interstellar, I think it was, when they really utilized the IMAX camera and did like a proper movie, like almost entirely on an IMAX camera. The technical aspects of doing that and getting out in like in the dirt with a like 70-pound camera on your shoulder, maybe it is not the most like inventive footage, if you will. I mean, there's a lot of fixed angles and all that, but the technicality of filming a movie like that with a camera like that should have been more appreciated. And the same thing, like I said, with the Planet of the Apes movies. I feel at least Dawn, when it comes to cinematography, it should have won. I don't know. It wasn't even nominated, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't. And none of the films won for special effects. They were all nominated, but never won.
Yeah. That's super weird.
And I think the most impressive thing that they learned as they progressed was the importance of light and shadow, which is something that so many movies with CGI special effects don't understand. It's not just the weightlessness, it's also the fact that CGI objects and characters always feel always look a little bit lighter than their background.
Yeah, you can definitely notice that. I rewatched Jurassic Park a couple of weeks ago. Still looks amazing, but those dinosaurs, yeah, they doesn't really fit into the movie in certain scenes when it comes to, yeah, like you said, light and shadow. And there is a bit of that. They don't, in some scenes, they don't really seem to touch the ground they're walking on, and that is something they have now in the Planet of the Apes movies perfected.
Yeah, honestly, I think that special effects artists should try to do the shitty TV test, which is, you know, render everything and then put it on a really bad receiver, because that's usually how you can tell if special effects are working or if special effects only work in a certain environment. Because I've seen some things where it's like, oh, if you have high def, high dynamic range, and all that stuff, it looks amazing. But if you don't have that, it looks like crap.
Yeah.
Like, one of the biggest issues that I have with going to the movies now is, quite frankly, my Blu-ray oftentimes look better than something that I watch in the theater. And that makes me really disappointed because, I'm not paying money for it anymore because I got Movie Pass. But, when I was paying money to go see movies, I did kind of feel ripped off. It's great to see a movie in a theater, but like when you're getting a step down in terms of visual quality, it really hurts. Now, the Planet of the Apes movies, I could watch on any screen, and I have actually watched on lesser movie screens, and the special effects still hold up because they've put so much time and effort into actually making it look good.
Yeah, it's like they care about the movies they make. I mean, yeah, it sounds weird, but some people do that still. And yeah, quick tangent there. I agree. Some movies you watch nowadays on the cinema screen, they kind of look, yeah, they kind of look bad, especially if they shot like with slightly like cheaper digital cameras. But then I remember this summer, last summer, watching Dunkirk on an actual film reel.
Mm-hmm.
It looks amazing because that's what a cinema screen is made for. So yeah, there is definitely more attention needed when you shoot on digital and you have a lot of digital effects. And like you said, yeah, they do that with the Planet of the Apes movies.
And they shoot on film with the Planet of the Apes films, which people thought was counterintuitive, because they were like, well, we have digital characters, why are we shooting on film? But they really wanted to capture more to read from, because they're, celluloid film, we're getting to the point where cameras are able to read that much information, but usually film is able to have more to pull from.
Yeah. About that. I don't remember exactly, but when I watched what's it called, Hateful Eight in the cinemas, they had like a little presentation because they showed it on a real film reel as well. And he said that the projectionist said that an actual film reel has something like the equivalent of like 8K resolution, and a digital movie now comes up to almost 4K. So yeah, there is a lot more information, even though it's an older tech.
It's one of the reasons why restored movies can look better than movies that actually come out today.
Oh yeah, I have a couple of those Blu-rays that it looks weird almost how good they look.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed because I recently saw the greatest war film I've ever seen in my life, and then I found out that Criterion on Filmstruck has actually restored the film, because when I watched the film, I got it on DVD, and it was of a lower quality. Like, it improved as the film went along, but I saw some images. I saw a video essay where they pulled from the film struck, and it was like night and day. And I was like, I
Mm,
have to see the movie this way. The movie is Come and See.
okay.
It's a Russian film.
I recognize the
It's
title. I haven't seen it though.
it it's a Russian war movie shot like a Bergman film.
Okay.
Lots of close-ups, uh lots of character moments. It's almost dreamlike. It's very hypnotic. It is the most powerful anti-war film that I've ever seen. Um, I anybody who's listening to this right now, watch Come and See. It is amazing, and it will change you.
Well, I'll put that on my list.
Yeah.
I don't watch enough international movies, so I'll definitely put that on my list.
After Loveless and Come and See, I'm definitely watching more Russian films.
Yeah. Oh, and about that, because I was trying to find a torrent of Loveless, but it actually came out on in theaters here in Sweden now. I found out. So
Nice.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm going to be able to see that in the theaters. So it's going to happen either this weekend or the next weekend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good movie.
Yeah, and your recommendation really sold me on it. So when we talked about it before, it sounds like a movie right up my alley.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely see Come and See. It's one of the best films I've ever seen.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, definitely. So do you have any more do you have any more points about the movies, or are we like sort of wrapping up? Because we've been going in more and more tangents. I'm like, maybe maybe we're getting there.
Yeah. I'm sorry that it's just the nature of just loving so many different things.
Oh yeah,
but
sure.
Yeah,
No, it's great to talk about movies, but
yeah. So yeah, Planet of the Apes, it's a great franchise. It does tackle a lot of very difficult issues. I'm not sure exactly what the new series is tackling. It does seem to tackle more the idea of what we're doing to the environment, what we're doing in with scientific breakthroughs, and our relation with animals.
yeah,
More so than the original franchise. Like, our relation with animals wasn't really what the old franchise was. It was a thinly veiled racial allegory. But I do think it's really interesting, and probably best that we move the franchise in a way that people can't start accusing the films of being racist and stuff, which they would if they were drawing those parallels today.
Yeah, and I think that's by design almost, that they're a bit lofty when it comes to its commentary. It's sort of a catch-all kind of commentary. You have rising up against oppressors, nature, medicine, and all that. And it isn't as I don't want to say ham-fisted, but as blatant as the old movies. So I think it's a good move, and I hope they don't get too bogged down in it if they continue with the franchise. So that's I definitely agree with that one. On that one.
One thing that I think is really fascinating, which we kind of touched on, was with the new series really hesitating to escalate things to violence. I think that is something that you don't see a lot of franchises getting into, which I think is unfortunate, because we live in a society that is so violent, and it is nice to see something coming out that is trying to say, how do we work together? How do we live in a society where people are different? How do we coexist? Because that seems to be Caesar's struggle throughout the entire films. How do we coexist with humans?
Yeah. And it's part of his character, since he grew up with humans. Like, he spent his entire life with humans up until the end of Rise, really. So he is torn. He's kind of torn between the two worlds, and that's why you have a character like Koba who just wants to eradicate them.
And which is interesting parallels because we're seeing that with ideologies nowadays. You know, you have the right and the left that are so extreme that that's creating problems.
Yeah.
You know, and I will say it's on both sides. You know, you have the left fighting with other members of the left and being really vicious, and also they're fighting the right, and then you have the right that are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I would consider myself a bit more. Would you call it centrist when it comes to that?
I don't know because as far as the rest of the world is considered, the United States is pretty conservative.
Yeah.
It's pretty right leaning. Even when we're leaning to the left, we're not as far left as the rest of the world.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, because I know I've seen a lot of videos where people talk about how crazy left Sweden is. But me living here and having grown up here, it's like it's not that super left. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a difference between countries like that. Yeah, I sort of, and I think it's like a position to hold, to have, like in many aspects in your life, like to stay sort of in the middle, to see both sides of it. And I think that's something that speaks to me when it comes to these movies, because it does look at both sides of the conflict with the character of Caesar.
Yeah, and it's something that I can draw parallels with my own life because I grew up in a really liberal household, but I was also in the military, which is often extremely conservative. So and then coming back has kind of been weird because, you know, I'm with the more liberal side because, you know, I lean more far left. But I've gotten into a lot of fights with people because I don't like groupthink. You know, I don't like boxing yourself in one ideology. I think that we as a society improve by listening as well as having a discussion. It seems like oftentimes societies want to just have other people listen to them instead of actually having a discussion on how we move forward. Which as far as the United States is concerned, I'm going to get really political for a second, extremely political. So just a forewarning. Okay. I'm really scared about what this sort of buildup of ideologies is going to be like in 2020, when the new election comes. Because we saw it in the United States, you know, at the beginning of the year. You know, when you know, Trump was elected president and you had the far right and the far left clashing, and I can only see it getting worse. And I'm not a person to pick sides on that one. I'm looking at both sides like, you both are idiots. Stop. Somebody's going to get hurt and somebody's going to get killed.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the Planet of the Apes franchise, because it is using fiction to make a commentary on the society that we have today.
Yeah. Like any good sci-fi should. And they've been consistent about it throughout the entire franchise. And I just want to say I'm not that politically involved, but I'm kind of falling on the same side where I sometimes like, this side makes a lot of sense, but then they just say something completely idiotic, like, oh damn it, okay, what are these people saying? Okay, oh no, and I go back and forth. So that's sort of me. That's why I try to stay in the middle, because sooner or later you're going to be disappointed with either the right or the left. So I'll stay in the middle.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, don't confine yourself to boxes.
No, exactly. like, find what works for you, but never be content with what you have. Always try to find something new.
Yeah,
So
bend yourself, don't break yourself.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, now that we solved politics, no, but yeah, I would say we touched upon most of the aspects of the Planet of the Apes franchise: themes, tone, the technical aspects, how this franchise should be like a what do you call it? Like a benchmark for other franchises and blockbuster movies overall. Yeah, like that's why it is my favorite franchise. It is just so well made in every aspect. So I'm glad
So
we've
much
had.
that you named
Oh yeah,
your
my channel
whole
after it.
channel. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it reverberates throughout my entire life, and I'm glad we've had it for such a long time, even longer than I've been alive. And I'm cautiously optimistic about the next 50 years of this franchise if it goes that far. But yeah, I think at least I'm content with ending it here. How about you?
I I would like to see them try a little bit more. Now,
Yeah.
I'm okay with them just trying in other mediums. If they just want to try in comics and maybe do like an animated show or something like that. Now, I would say the animated show would have to be in tone of the movies.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want sort of a downgrade, which is what you saw with a lot of other franchises. Even the best of the Star Wars animated shows feel a little toned down from what the movies are.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't. I watched some of it. I watched some of the Clone Wars series, but then I was like, no, it's not for me. I haven't seen
Right.
Rebels and that. Yeah.
I enjoyed Rebels, but it is a kid's show.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would, if you're going to do a Planet of the Apes animated show, I would like to see it done in the style of the films. Obviously, it doesn't have to be CG, though that would be really awesome. I don't know how much money that would cost.
Well, they spend a lot of money on shows nowadays. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. Each episode is like a feature-length movie now.
I couldn't even get through the first episode of Troy because I thought it was awful.
I haven't seen it yet. I saw they released it like yesterday or something.
Well, they spent like $1 billion on it. And so like I watch a little bit of the show and it's like, wow, this show's gonna fail. And it's like Netflix, you might want to stick to the weekly schedule for some of your shows, especially your more expensive shows, just so that you're not blowing your load on something that's not successful.
Yeah. And once again, you can go back to Planet of the Apes there. How you like with the lower budget, you need to be more creative. So like try and focus on that. Now that'll be hard with an animated show because just a lot of cost of making the show. But like keep that sensibility when you're writing it, I suppose, if they're going to do like a TV show or something.
Yeah, or they could do it in the style that they did with the video game that came out recently.
Yeah.
Slightly downgraded, but still to a certain quality.
Exactly. Yeah. So I actually have to kind of quit now. I gotta get up for work in about 6 hours. So I'm calling it quits right here.
All right.
But it was a lot of fun talking to you again. Especially about a subject that we both really appreciate. And to everyone watching this, either now or in the archive version, go check out Ren's channel, All Walks of Film, if you want to see more, especially like the podcast format, which you really excel in, I would say.
Thank you.
Oh, no, definitely. And
I also have 5 podcasts on Planet of the Apes. I think I have a whole subsection in
Okay.
my channel of Planet of the Apes stuff.
Oh, okay. I've seen a few of them. I didn't know that many. Okay. Well, I gotta check those out now. But yeah, so yeah, check out Rent's channel. And next week, this is supposed to be a weekly podcast or live stream, but next week we're doing a hiatus, just so we can build some anticipation for the premiere of Infinity War. I'm going to be milking that a lot because, like I said, I'm not a fan of the Marvel franchise, but I know that a lot of people like it, and I know it will garner a lot of clicks. So in 2 weeks, we're doing a top 10 Marvel movie countdown, which is I've been struggling with because I don't think there is 10 movies that I like in that franchise. But yeah, keep an eye out for that. Yeah, check out my channel if you want to see reviews of movies. Leave a comment if you want a movie reviewed. Ren did that recently. He was the one that asked me to review Elephant.
And that was a great review, by the way.
Thank you. So yeah, definitely give me more requests to review movies. But other than that, have a good one. And yeah, we should definitely do this again about some topic like this. But we'll figure that out when it comes.
Hopefully, maybe something a little bit more broad range, because we tend to go on tangents, and yeah. I think if we like picked a topic, maybe not a franchise, but like just a topic of film. I know I've kind of wanted to do that with my channel a little bit. I think that could be fun.
Oh, sure, definitely. Well, we'll talk more about that offline, or well, off air, yeah. I should say. Yeah. But yeah, that's the end of the show, people. So give it a like if you like it. Subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, like I said before, have a good one. Bye.